Hello, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. So this will be now Guardian Talks 5, episode 5, and today we have my first podcast guest, Brother Lee Mudway. We have done videos before, and if you know us, you will have no doubt seen those videos. But this is the first time we're going to be having a conversation in this format, a bit more relaxed, although no doubt will be just as deep and intense as is usual for us. So, yeah. So first of all, Brother Lee, if you'd just like to give us a brief overview of where you're at right now and the rough direction of things for yourself personally, and also how you see that fitting into the wider perspective of things.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure to be on, mate, and I'm glad you're starting up a whatever this will be, my friend. This podcast idea. When did I leave you guys? I don't know. Was it? It feels like about 6 years ago, but it was probably 3 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks. I'd say it was about 3 weeks. Yeah.
A lot happened since then. So I left for Cambodia. Been stationed. What stationed is probably a fair word for it. By anchor. What Siem Reap, beautiful place with Brother Mike, Brother Dean, Sister Mariana, and a few of the others of our group. For 9 months, I think it was, or best part of, maybe a bit longer for I, not sure. And divinely had to leave 10th, I think, of September. I'm guessing, but somewhere around about there.
Yes, it was
We're in
the 10th,
September now.
yes.
August,
August,
10th
sorry,
of
it's the
August.
10th of August. Yeah.
Yeah, to go to Mandalay, Burma, Myanmar, and that place is an interesting place. It's a militia war zone. It's very much locked down, and the whole place is rationed, and the people are being squeezed. And those environments are not great. I had to come to Bangkok first, a few days in Bangkok before Myanmar, and of course Bangkok is kind of similar, but not as oppressed. So you feel the squeeze. Been to Manila for quite a few months as well in the Philippines, and it's intense there too. But none more so than Mandalay or Burma. So having gone there for a week, dropping in some, I call it brightening up some of the dark energies, let's say, without going into too deep. And then it was back to Bangkok, to my next destination, divinely, which is Sri Lanka, Colombo. But it still required a couple of weeks, actually, I think about a month, 28 whatever days in Bangkok. Again, bringing this energy, this light, this vessel, this proximity of the physical to Bangkok. And divinely, yes, it was required that I remained in this location specifically for this period, which is lovely because Don Muang is not Bangkok. It doesn't feel like Bangkok at 11, 12 o'clock at night. It's quiet outside. It's not like that rampant Bangkok. But Mandalay, you could drop a pin at 11 p.m. and everything was quiet. The center of a very large, beautiful place. What was is now just corrupted. So next step, Sri Lanka, and I'd like to just before we continue, just to put in some words, some verbiage we will use anyway. Divine. When we talk to divine, it's not a thing; it's everything. So there's a lot of words that we need to redefine inside a lot of this, and one of them is divinely placed. And this isn't by choice, our choice necessarily, but it's by a higher choice. And that divine designation allows for a higher aspect of us to be in existence too, and a prime creator, if you will, a prime divine consciousness that can be directing a little bit of the show with all of us playing our roles. So divine is what it is to you, what you wish it to be, but it's certainly not anything from a book or a religious factional study or those sort of things. It's much more abstract. The same with a few of the other words that we'll be using in this. So yeah, we've come to a culmination, let's say, through this period, and we're at the beginning of the next step. So that's where I've been, brother. A little bit of that anyway lately. The architecture, the structural architecture, is very similar to Angkor in Mandalay in its geometries and design, water and structures. So that was an interesting aside, and I know that there's some linkage between maybe more than that actually. Anchor, Mandalay, and the ongoing or what will be ongoing Sri Lanka. And this forms a what would be looking like a triangle, possibly close to actually a water molecule.
Well, just to touch
And
on
it's
that,
108, 36, 36.
just to touch
Mm.
on the what you're talking to, 2 points. First of all, I think I said to you in a message where I've been divinely placed now, further away from where we were on the other side of the river. I've been getting this very deep sensation of stretching a barrier. So, like, if you imagine a circumference around the Angkor Wat, and it's like I'm stretched. I get this feeling that it's being stretched out another 2 kilometers either side, and also as well. I can't remember whether I've seen it on a video. Someone said it to me directly, or whether it was actually in a dream. I've been trying to rack my brain, but somebody told me that things are quite intense in Sri Lanka at the moment. Do you have any foreknowledge of what you're walking into, or are you just walking into it as is?
Intense. Walking into Mandalay, that's intense. Though I kind of find these things funny when one say it's intense. There's sensitivities to energetics and sensitivities to these things. Intensity is a perspective.
Mm.
Everywhere's intense if it is. If you feel it that way, of course, you can feel it as non-intense too by standing above it. So no, I haven't heard too much about. In fact, the other way around, they've just released all of their or relaxed all of their visa issues and concerns. Mandalay was very much different. You had to 7 days, 14 days, actually, I think it was,
I
to get
remember what
a
you had
visa for
to
Mandalay.
endure going
Jump through
around the
some
house.
hoops.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, and it was kind of the same for Sri Lanka until I went to actually do it, and it said you don't need it anymore. 35 countries they've relaxed their visas for 35 different countries, UK being one of them. So you can just turn up on their doorstep and
Oh,
walk
right.
in. It's got the same sort of, I think, economy relatively as Cambodia and
Okay.
here and other places that are very inexpensive
So what is the visa
relatively.
situation there then? It's basically you only need a visa if you're going to stay past a certain amount of time, or if you want to actually do some
No,
business and work there.
they're the same rules everywhere. You walk in and you've got a tourist visa when you land, so it's you go through immigration and they stamp your passport, right?
Got you, got you.
Um, but then I believe it's a relatively simple process for another 6 months.
Got
Um,
you. Right.
3 months, 6 months extensions on that. So again, I think that can be done online. So it's these things are relaxing down a little bit. They're calming down the regulations on a lot of this because we don't accept them,
Mm.
so they disappear. But in that mode, they're disappearing more slowly.
And at this
Nevertheless,
moment, sorry, just at this junction, just to interject for people watching who
yeah,
might not know this fact as well, that supports what Brother Lee's just said. A very, very key signifier of that very thing is Kenya, who have done away with visas altogether.
yeah, that happened a
So
while ago. The removal of visas completely. That was, I think, they were the pre vanguard of that, the
they were.
first place to do that. Um, it, to give people a better idea of this, and maybe some people don't know, but I was divinely sent to the Philippines. When would this be? January, February, March 23, I think.
Yes.
Um, and it was heavily yeah, plague ridden regulations there, and they needed passport. They wanted visas. Sorry, they wanted jab certificates and
Yeah, yeah.
health passports and all of these things. And of course, I didn't have any. So we had a nice little dance for a couple of hours, and they let me in. Not that they could stop, but 2 weeks later, that whole system was gone, finished, complete. Sister Mariana, my divine partner,
Mhm.
turned up there, and none of it existed anymore because it was removed from existence.
Mhm.
And as we go forward with this, and we do not accept that which is intolerable and unacceptable, and we stand in the face of it, then it
Yeah.
disappears. As long as we're doing it with truth, divine benevolence, and no anger, purity. So these things are for each to walk their own paths, but compliant compliance to these demands that are outside of the soul, it's a violation of your universal rights, your soul rights. If you comply with those, then it continues. But if you don't, yes, it could cause a little bit of a dance, a little bit of a tete-a-tete, but it disappears. And that's one of the keys with a lot of these things.
So, so just to give listeners a background, myself and Brother Lee and many other brothers and sisters have been doing work regarding energy grids, adjusting old, turning off some, turning on new ones, adjusting old damaged ones, etc., etc. Now, Sri Lanka is obviously going to be a part of this, I imagine. To what degree is this a part of that? And also as well, which I believe is the question on many of the brothers and sisters who are engaged in this work, is it looking like the completion of that work is nearing? And what's that going to look like?
Let's go back a little bit. Yeah, Sri Lanka, the same as many others, Stargates and other energetic centers are around, and in Sri Lanka, these are to be whatever activate is probably the wrong word with this, coded, synchronistically coded, so sequentially. So a lot of let's say a lot of the work that our brothers and sisters have been doing on the grids and on the energetic structures, etc., etc., are synchronous. They are sequential. They are timed to happen as required. So we can't force any of this, and we can't push any of this, even though we are the creators of all of this, because it has to play out the way it's designed to play out. And there is some, let's say, malleability, or there has been anyway, certainly from the ground experience of that time, of those timelines. So where it seemed that one thing would happen, it hasn't, and it will happen later. And this malleability or squeezing things and compressing. So this has been tedious but ongoing. And the question you asked about, are we getting closer? Yes. Is it close to the end? Absolutely. How far away is that? Don't know. The end of August. No, let's leave it at that for now, bro. And then let's bring this in about how we've moved to this point and where we are. So is it moving towards a completion? Absolutely. Is it close? Yes, very. Is it imminent? Absolutely. And inevitable? Yes. When is it? Don't know. Don't know. And it's 3 years ago. and
Well,
now it's been going on.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably sit here for the next several hours listing multiple different, what would you call them? Signifiers, landmarks, indicators, whatever you want to slap, whatever you want to slap the label on it. I mean, everything from, I've mentioned it several times, the language being used by talking heads in both legacy, but mostly alternative media, through to the emergence of groups, like, and in the past as well. So let's take Cabby, for instance. Cabby isn't the community assemblies of the British Isles, and they've come with us in under GPMS. They provided our divine laws, but also in the process of that now, with the events going on in Europe, having been in spaces, I'm seeing other versions of Cabby in their infancy coming forward. But compared to, say, in my early Truther days, where those were the exact kind of things I was looking for and was wondering where they are and how to start maybe. And when I suggested the idea of, there was very tepid response to at best. Now I'm seeing it actually happening. Every attempt in the past was like sort of, it died in the cradle. Now I'm seeing that not only are they emerging, but they're very well organized. They are all seem to be coming into greater alignments with higher honor, virtue, integrity, and those, principles that are fundamental with GPMS world. There's a very, very different feel to the energy and to the momentum and to the actions and the language that's being used, and it's cumulative. The longer you watch this, the less you can doubt that there is an event point, whatever you want to label that as an individual. If you're a Christian, you'll call it the rapture. If you're Buddhist, you're stepping into nirvana. Whatever. There is an event coming. And in fact, yesterday, I can't remember who it was I was talking to. Even if you were an atheist, even if you were somebody who was purely imperialistic, materialistic, empiricist, and had no spiritual, metaphysical, or religious bent whatsoever, even those kinds of people could not deny that there is an event moment that we're building towards. So it's on the cards,
Absolutely.
it's in the awareness, and it's starting to show itself everywhere. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, one of the things that we've got to remember currently, anyway, is the levels of consciousness currently in this experience are numerous. And that means that there is many, many different types of belief system currently running. And these are separational and divisional belief systems. And what you're referencing there is the bridging of these. One's releasing lesser beliefs and moving into a place of more openness. And this gives it more substance, because now we can speak to things with more people about more things with less resistance, right? Less friction. And friction is pressure over time. So it's pushing against rather than going with this flow. And even though I don't like that flow, it's the concepts are very, very simple. Take away the resistance and you don't feel the pressure. Take away the friction, i.e. the fear, and what's left is love. And these things are effortless. The love side is effortless, and the other side is full of energy and full of force. So we're moving into a powerful state on a collective scale. Individually, each has done whatever they're doing, but on a collective state, it's moving into a more empowered state, a higher frequency, a higher place of being, less enforcement, no force, more powerful. And this is where the creators are in their authority. Authority does not mean external, it means internal. They're at peace. Nirvana is a state of being, it's a state of mind. It's not a place, it's a state of being. And being means not doing. Well, doing is all you've got to do in this capitalistic structure. It's all about doing. And Nirvana is all about being. And I wonder why people are so confused that they're in hell when not doing is being. And that's the heaven version. So what we're seeing with these sovereign groups has been very, very interesting. Been involved. I've personally been involved since the very beginning, if not before, with GPMS. So we've spoken to many, Rick and I, and there's been resistance from many, many different areas of this. But there was always common ground within that resistance. Yes, the resistance, the separation took it sideways, but the common ground was always realized. And then these implications and complications came into the thinking of others, which took them separate again because it wasn't what they wanted or they weren't in charge. These things are selfish. And what we're seeing now is a lesser version of that. What we're seeing now is the ones that are managing, directing, leading these organizations at the levels that we're speaking to now are not selfish. And therefore, we can communicate on a higher level. And in bringing that communicate to them, they are expanding and they are seeing, wow, these guys have got something too. And to take this one step further, I was speaking to a guy I've known for 3 years, Sam, from Texas, I think, and he's been in Egypt for a while. And even, he doesn't want to be limited by GPMS. But in his own mind, he has limited it because he believes GPMS is limiting him. I want to be able to build what I want without the restrictions of GPMS. There is none. There is none. This is the point. Everybody's building what they want inside there is no restriction of GPMS, but it's the ideologies that are that play. And this is where we've had to upscale now or upgrade false beliefs into holographic beliefs. So we've had to take the ideology, the idea of false beliefs and reify them as that, no, they're not false. They're holographic. They exist in this temporal space. They're not false, but they're not true. But they're real. So there's no need to call them false. It's kind of demeaning them. No, they have an effect. They have a place, but only in temporal space, and therefore it's a limited belief system. But it is a holographic one for this space. Now, as we move through August, we were given, and 6 months ago we were given actually that the end of August would be the release of the sacral area. Sacral area for those that understand chakras to a degree. Root, sacral, solar plexus, heart would be the lower ones up to the heart. Sacral would be where these lower frequencies and limitations and chains were held. And we've spoken about this before, brother.
We have.
Now, as we move through that phase, it was the divine brothers, higher divinity informed I that it wasn't fair to say the sacral would be released from existence at the end of August because it took away from those who had already released it. This idea, this area of being in that energetic centers or in those energetic frequencies.
Okay.
These frequencies are corrupt. Relatively, they are not of the heart, but they attach to the heart and cause manipulation and corruption emotionally and consciously. And these conscious corruptions are projected out through the third eye to be believed by the consciousness of the individual who's undergoing that process. Now, all of these are holographic belief systems because there really isn't anything outside of the heart and the consciousness that has any implication to us on the divine level. We are
co-creational reality.
And yes, the functions of creation would be love and consciousness, the navigation and the energetic, the drive, the engine, the fuel, love, and the navigation process, GPS, whatever you want to call it, consciousness. And the two working together create harmony. Anything outside of that is surplus to requirements, and that's where manipulations came in. So it wasn't just these lower frequencies that were being manipulated externally by the existing control structures, but it was each's job to experience those levels per se and rise above them, honor themselves above those fears until that they were released completely. Now, at this stage, I'm also going to say that none of this was required by each soul. It was not a soul contract, nor was it required for soul growth. This is not a place where you have to understand fear before you understand love as a divine product. Everybody, all the souls knew that before they here. So this isn't a place of learning. This wasn't a school. This was something else, which is now being rectified. So at the end of August, we've had a very, very large destabilization, it seems, of lower frequencies in the vast majority, actually, I believe. Be that subtle or be that not so subtle. That's the game, right? All the different layers of this can happen. And one can say, well, I didn't feel anything. And the other could be flat on their back for a week. And it doesn't mean to say they didn't experience the same thing. It's just how they experienced it.
Yes.
And what they needed to do in that experience.
Yeah.
So we've moved through this period and there's been a large reshuffling of the timelines, which what we on now, the 6th. So
yes,
that's relative to the last 5 days. And this is what's been ongoing. So we're in a period now of another 10 weeks, it seems, of an integration of the release and rising above and into the heart through the solar plexus for certainly the divine collective, the 5.3 million divine ones, Christed ones, whatever you wish to call them, and however many of humanity need to do this at this time. Now, I'd like to say in this that we use the words human and meta-human, higher human, whatever the words may be. Human would be the base product, the 666, the carbon base relative, and that would be the lower human, the primal, the feral, the survival mode, that version, the fear-based relatively, and in survival mode. So when I refer to human, I'm talking about the lower human that isn't in their hearts and are subject to
Reaction.
negative and limited thought processes. Yes, emotionally reactive. Meta, higher, whatever you wish to call it, divine one, Christed one, they've ascended those levels. They are maybe subject to them, but they are not of them and not in them. And it's each's choice then to remain in their heart, and through their process and through their discipline, they'll find their ways to do that.
Yes.
But that's not necessarily the human collective at this stage. There may be a period of
Well, it goes from
what were we given
being
before?
it goes from
3 years.
being it goes for yeah, about 3 years, yeah. But it goes from being an unconscious sort of involuntary um pull along, like bobbing along on the help us on the ocean, to a what was the word I thought of then before? It was to a participatory. You are now participating in reality, not just being shunted along or seemingly pulled along by it fully, with things out of control, with no, sense of, purpose or direction. Now it's a participatory, consensual, and engaged with activity.
Let's make those words easier. When I went through my process in 2019, I fully thought I was driving the car, but I found out I wasn't. I was barely holding onto the tow hitch on the back, being dragged along by it, thinking I was in control of it. I was fully under the auspices or influences of my subconscious, my unconscious, thinking I was conscious. So when you were talking about participatory, I would just use the word conscious, but truly conscious, as opposed to believing you are. So yes, you jump in the driver's seat and you take control of the vehicle, but to do that, you've got to have accountability and responsibility. Otherwise, you can't blame somebody else for everything that's gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So at least with the old way, the unconscious way, where the car crashed into a wall, you blamed the wall.
There's
Now,
no get out of jail free card once you cross that line.
no, and if you need one, then you haven't crossed that
We
line.
haven't crossed that line.
So there's these, there's these. They're not complications; they are beautiful rules. Let's call them rules. And if you don't obey the rules, if you don't play by the rules, if you think you can calm creation, no,
Can't get in
you
the
aren't.
game.
And you know your own truth,
Can't get
and
in
you
the
report
game.
the truth back subconsciously to creation, whilst you consciously believe you're not. So no, it doesn't work. Cause and effect.
Well, you can lie
Cause
to
and effect
yourself, but
is
you
the
can only lie to yourself on the surface. You can't lie to yourself on any level that's significant.
but lying to yourself really realistically is telling the truth to creation.
Denial.
But just believing your own lies whilst creation's laughing relatively at your, I say it with a little bit of a smile, a little bit of tongue in cheek right now, looking back on it, but it was significantly difficult at the time to comprehend these things. And it certainly didn't feel funny or humorous. But then I didn't have the gratitude for it then. I was still working through the other stuff. But these things are for each to understand and each to experience in their own ways. But nevertheless, anybody that can recognize patterns, that actually looks at patterns of behavior from themselves and looks at them in context over years rather than minutes, will see their own patterning. And they will recognize, if they are diligent enough, the bioalgorithm or the biorhythm of creation. They'll
Well,
recognize the frequencies and the waves.
yeah, I mean, recently I've been emphasizing to those around me, to those who end up going into discussion with me down these lines, I've been emphasizing observation, 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 observation. It's don't worry about doing it. Don't worry about getting it right. Don't worry about changing it. Just focus on observing it and seeing it and catching it, and then don't even get hung up on the idea of doing something about it. When you do, just see it and get to know it. Observe it like you would observe an animal in nature or something, a process in nature or something. Then just in the act of observation itself, usually rectification comes pretty fast. Usually the act of observation is in and of itself enough to trigger a realization of the function, the A plus B, the cascade of consequences.
That
Sometimes that can,
depends.
it does depend. Sometimes that could be just enough. But what it will always be is an expansion of your awareness of what's going on. Even if you don't understand it at first,
Yeah.
you'll say, "Oh, this is the first time I've observed what he was saying. I've observed this about myself. I might not know what it means. I might not know what to do with it, but now this is the first time I have consciously observed myself doing it, and that can only be empowering."
There's a big philosophical thing on this, and it's very, very, very key. When you're observing yourself, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Who's the observer? If you're looking at yourself, the actor. So you're now two, aren't you? Now you're looking at something else. Now there's only one of you, so which one's real, the actor or the observer? And therefore, the observer should be neutral and non-emotional
Mm-hmm.
and non-judgmental
Mm-hmm.
and therefore objective. The observer should be objective, not judgmental, not subjective.
But I mean,
And there's one of the key.
yeah, I consider that to be like more like stage three, though. I know
Well, this
exactly,
is a
and
moving on.
I know exactly what you're saying, but I mean, but what you just described to me is once I've got them to observe a thing, to then move towards what you've just said.
They've got to observe it truthfully, brother, honorably, from the highest, not
Mm-hmm.
from a subjective place of view. So if you just give somebody observe your actions, what what are they looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, when ones understand that they are the cause and effect of everything, nothing happens to you, everything happens for you by you, then you can look at your actions and say, what did I do there and what came back? Was it my highest? What choice did I make? Why did I make that choice? And they can dig into the questioning of what did I do? Honestly, I really want to know what happened. Where were the triggers? What was behind it? And you know, my friend, how hidden those emotional triggers can be. Sorry, drivers, I call them. Those emotional drivers can be. Because the consciousness wants to create stories about why things happen, or the lower consciousness, to hide those lower emotional drivers.
To justify its
And
own
this
existence.
observer, yeah, this observer, the true observer, needs to know the truth, not, and it needs to stand with the truth, and that requires virtue and honor, and courage is the bigger key. Courage to accept that it was you and not them.
Well,
Now, in that action,
no,
sorry,
carry
go
on.
on.
No, carry on. In that action.
Well, in that action of the courage, you have stood above pride. You're not going to reify or justify or reason your actions. You're going to try to get down to the bottom of them and say, this is what happened and this is what it caused. I don't want to do that again. No. And you change your actions because you're now the conscious observer rather than the unconscious actor. The actions are emotionally reactive generally. If they're not, then they are responsible because you respond to the situation, you don't react. Once responsible, then that response is coming from the heart generally because it's conscious.
Yes.
When it's reactive, it's not. It's coming from an emotional driver. So the consciousness takes over and runs off on its lower fight flight systems, trying to prove itself right. The conscious observer doesn't care about right or wrong. It just wants truth. And it will then rectify that truth in its following action because it's only about rising, not justifying. So if things are seen that could be more virtuous than previous, then it would be honorable to adopt a more virtuous action next time. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, there's no blame for the previous one.
Mm-hmm.
It's acceptance that okay, and that's what I did. No worries at all. Love you. Right. Let's not do it again. And the next time you go into the same thing, you change your action. There's the conscious observation, and there's the rectification and reconciliation of the previous action. This harmonizes it and wipes the slate. Internally, there is no internal debt left. There's no negative. So these things are very, very real. And in a line of speaking it, we've done this before, where you would be in the audience of a play. Now, when you're acting in the play, you have a script and you are scripted. You have to play that part. But in the audience, you can create anything you wish. You don't have to play the part. You can choose not to. You can choose to walk out of the theatre. You can choose to have nothing to do with it, or you can choose to enjoy it, whatever you wish. But you are in the one that's got the choice. When you're in the show, you haven't. You have a role to play. Since 2015, the divine ones on this plane have been able to write their own scripts to whatever degree their soul contract allowed them to, dependent upon their frequency, their purity, if you wish, their lack of their integrity. Let's call it that. No, that means that a lot of things can be changed within what it was that you were here to do, and a lot of things can be released because they're unnecessary now. Because actions have proven conscious observation and harmony is more valuable to you, your inner value, provably by your actions, meant more to you than the external material world's requirements of you. And hence, non-compliance to that which is intolerable and unacceptable or goes against your own soul values. So yeah, it's a game, brother. It's been a game, but it's still very simple.
I'm seeing that simplex. Now, seeing it so much more now. The courage, the lowering of tolerance for the intolerable, speaking out. Almost in some instances it comes across quite cavalier, but it's clumsy in some instances. Other times it's come across in very divine. You can tell like that, like something's clicked in them, and in that moment, whatever it was they're speaking about in that moment, they are standing in absolute divine authority. You can't question. You know what I mean? They're radiating it. It's like heat off a fire. In that moment, something's clicked, and it's just, and what they're speaking to is pure truth. It's just there coming out, and I'm seeing it more and more and more and more. And it's like you will have, because you're somebody like me who probably daydreamed when they were younger and stared at stuff. But you must have played the game of staring at a window where it's raining and the droplets start to form on the window. And you know at some point, one of those droplets is going to go whoop, and connect to another one. And then, but it might not do anything else after that. And then, but then it'll go whoop, and then connect to another one. But at some point, there's going to be a moment where it goes whoop, and then it streams down the window in a stream, in a lock stream, you know. But there's a build-up moment where as the water's accumulating on the surface of the screen, like some of them start to merge, and then that pulls away from another one. But then at some point there will be enough of a build-up so that next whoop streams it down the window. I used to look, and that's very much the sensation I get now in terms of the honor, virtue, integrity, loss of tolerance for the intolerable, you know, all of these characteristics, courage, the attempt to stand in divine in authority, and sometimes they don't even know exactly what it is that they're doing as well. You can tell it's just something shifted in them, and they're now feeling, you know, driven and pulled to do it. So, my question is now is at what point are all these little conglomerations going to create the stream?
Let's look at it the other way around, rather than that. Let's look at it as ballast and anchors on a airship, and it can't take flight because it has too many anchors. It's carrying too much weight, too much density. And let's give disharmonics a density, a value, a negative value, and let's call those anchors. So whilst ones are carrying negative frequential values within them, believing these things and acting upon them, they have anchors. And those anchors mean that they are unable to take flight. Now, those anchors are not, these are emotional connections that are unnecessary, but necessary for the individuals. Nothing's wrong with these, but they need to be released. And This is where the interesting parts come by the reification of all of these belief systems, holographic belief systems inside the consciousness of the collective, as if it's real, and it's not. And therefore, the anchors are being held on to as if they're necessary because the sky is full of fear. No, the anchors are the fear, and the sky is full of love, but it's the other way around. So let's look at it as snipping them off and releasing these and letting it all rise up. Now, we've had brothers and sisters here that are trying to push the thing up off the ground, um, raise the whole thing, get underneath it and give it a push. But this is the same as trying to push that boulder up a hill. It's a lot of effort, it's a lot of force involved in it. And ultimately, it doesn't get you anywhere. Um, the more you push, the heavier it gets. The other way around that is to sit at the top of the hill and keep going upwards. And it pulls everything up underneath you. And this is frequency bands. So whilst we've got a frequency band in here, let's say of the fourth frequency and the fifth frequency up here, the ones that are stuck, the ones that are in this frequency are not able to come into this frequency. And it doesn't matter how much the ones in this frequency go down to try to lift. As soon as they are in here, they can't go back into this frequency. So all of these things don't work. The only way you can do it is by raising the whole thing at the top, and it brings that band up. And what's been happening is all of these energetic connections, fear-based energetic limitations, are being determinated. They're having their connections determinated. They are to be re-terminated somewhere else, and that's the higher versions. So what we've watched and what we've done and what we've experienced is the release of the anchors, the release of these negative frequencies within our own individual fields, harmonizing of those to create a more neutral state. And in the neutral state is full flow of the energetics because it's not being used or friction or force or anything. It's now all the potential for everything is there. And that's where the frequencies come in, and that's when you rise substantially, actually, even if it is sequential initially or has been. It doesn't mean to say it will be for others. So what took 7 years for I maybe will take 7 minutes for somebody else. Great. It doesn't matter. These things are inevitable. So as these frequencies are released, as these lower frequencies are released, then the higher frequencies are adopted. This changes attitude, this changes consciousness, it changes actions, and this changes reality. We are purgatory is the best way of describing where the collective currently is in the doors to the gates of heaven, and you can't go through if you're carrying emotional baggage from the past. So these are being snipped, and our brothers and sisters are walking through the gates. We can't jump in a pit and help somebody climb out of it, because we'll get stuck in it too, or we'll sympathy. We can't go down into something we are not anymore. But what we can do is hold the top of that frequency and raise it and keep pushing it upwards, and keep that line open for our brothers and sisters to come through. And currently that's about self-judgment. This is about self-awareness and self-accountability, self-realization on an individual and a collective scale. And this is about release of belief systems and re-evaluation of humanity per se, with a divine twist to it, because humanity is divine. These dark controllers are not. And which one's more valuable? And although the control system has tried to remove, dim, put out, extinguish humanity, it won't be extinguished. The human experience will be maintained. First protocol I learned, don't know where from, but the human experience will be maintained. And that means that the dark have already lost because they will not extinguish it.
Well,
but what is human?
Yeah,
when we talk about the higher human.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Sorry. But the thing with that is, though, as time goes by and the more information gets released and the greater levels to which consciousness expands, the nature of that human experience itself changes. So that which is required to be maintained itself changes. It's constantly evolving because as the consciousness rises, people become more aware of various deceptions and start looking towards truth and start raising the consciousness, start bringing higher.
Oh, I'd like to.
Do you see what
I
I'm
don't want to get
saying?
down into that. Yeah, but I don't. I wasn't what I was talking to.
Yeah.
That was the lower human experience. I wasn't talking to that. I was talking to the human experience, not the lower human. And the experience doesn't need to be what it was. It can be the heaven on earth that it used to be prior to what it was. I mean, many as a point of concept before humanity, before these souls descended into this fall from grace into these frequencies, these lower frequencies, they were already in the higher frequencies in a heaven, God world, whatever you want to call it, experience. And that's the experience I'm talking to. The heaven on earth experience will be maintained. The ability to incarnate into a physical vessel that is human, relatively, but without description, without definition, not lower, higher, meta, but in that environment will be maintained. This playground doesn't get lost for the soul, and it doesn't need to be. This is maintenance of what would you call it? Preservation is a word that we've been taught. We've been told many times. Preservation of something. Otherwise, what needs preserving here? But there is something very valuable here that does need preservation. And it isn't the dark controllers, it is the human experience, but the higher version of it. And our brothers and sisters, like you, brother, are now walking the higher version as a role model for the lower versions to see, to raise into their higher versions, all of which are equal. This is a point about it. There's nobody here higher than lower. There is a hierarchy in what it is that we do, but the roles are just the roles. The souls are where they are. Each is an equal in the whole.
Well, hierarchy
it's just
in
what
this
their roles
instance
are.
merely serves towards function.
Ability.
That's all.
Yes.
It has
and that's
no
the point.
significance in any on any level of spirituality, culture,
Well, yeah, it's
metaphysics.
not spirituality. There will be, yes, relatively. But that's based on virtue and access to information, access to the Akash and ability to bring it in, function. So inside this, there will be mentors, there will be teachers, there will be guardians, there will be guides and assistants that will have a different designation to others, but that doesn't make them more valuable. It just simply means they have a different purpose, a different function, and it's all of the cogs moving together in unity and harmony produce the heaven on earth scenario. Or not all of them. We don't need all of them, but they produce that that synchronicity, that symmetry, that harmony, that melody, and that's where we are currently. We are waiting now for our brothers and sisters. For instance, this thing with Sam about how he felt limited by my answer to his brother: go out and do what you want to do. But if I'd explain to him about the virtue, honor, integrity, my own input to GPMS foundationally is the basis of GPMS in the new world. It doesn't matter what anybody argues with about what they see in GPMS. They cannot even argue with virtue being valid or integrity being valid. They can argue about semantically about what they believe integrity is, but ultimately that doesn't stand up. Only the truth does. So in my reply to him, go out and do what you want, brother. Just share GPMS with who you speak to. Help your brothers out, regardless as to whether you agree with a couple of their opinions on what it is. Yes, you might not like what Rick says. You might not like what Lee says. You might find that Dean or Michael say something you don't like, but that does not take away the value of what GPMS stands for.
The fundamentals.
And that's where ones forget these things because they are unconsciously ego-driven by the lower limitations slightly. And I understand it. There's no blame, but it's difficult to bridge to those that are fixed, or was difficult to bridge. But nevertheless, brother, we're getting there. And this breakdown, this destabilization, this churning, for want of a better word, at the end of August should bring about quite a big shift. And I'm seeing it I don't wish to talk too much about the lower timeline, but yeah,
Well,
we maybe talk to that in a
I'll tell
bit.
you what, yeah, at this moment, we'll pause it so I can go get a lighter because mine's not working. And we'll take this moment to pause. And then when we come back, we will talk to the lower timeline without reification. So 3, 2, 1, pause. Hello, and we are back again after a short break, and we start recording. Oh, 2 seconds. Yep. And we started recording back again because the conversation we were having off cameras started to merge in, and so the two key words. One you asked me to remind you, and the key word that's has triggered us to start recording again. So boundaries and direction. So if you want to take it from me.
Yes, boundaries. I wish to talk about boundaries ever so quickly, because you were talking a bit earlier about one standing up and non and all of these things and the way they do it divinely.
Yeah,
And
having these
I wanted
moments
to.
of it. Yeah.
I agree, and they're great, and all of them are great. But
It's not,
boundaries.
yeah, it's not stated.
Let's bring boundaries back into where boundaries should be, and they are an internal job, not externalized.
Mm,
Boundaries are not telling others or situations or environments what they must do.
mm,
Boundaries are internal to what you must do, what one must do individually. So, for instance, one boundary I created for myself was I would not allow my mind to take over from my heart, and therefore had to be very highly conscious that that was my truth was being the promise I made through that boundary
mm,
was non-acceptance of false belief systems, fear-based belief systems, forming actions in I that were not of the highest.
mm,
So very disciplined and very intense process relatively, but it wasn't forced upon others. And these ideas of telling others and then stopping, no, my boundary is this. I do not accept that. There's no argument, there's no anger, there's no rage, there's no selfishness, and there's no personalization of it. Simply no, that's not for I thank you. Bye. And these things are then this is what is put out rather than telling the outside or aggressively or angrily reacting and saying that was divine. There is no anger in righteous indignation at all. It's authoritative, it's stoic, it's stalwart. It's not angry, it's
mm,
decisive, it's finished, it's no. And the authority of no internally. It doesn't matter then what happens outside of you because it's got no impact upon you when you've chosen not to not pay attention.
yes.
So, with the intention of not paying that which is lesser attention, then you raise your own boundaries and you can insert them where you wish, but they're never external. So, I wish to you can describe it to another so that one knows what you will accept and what you won't. Of course, you can, but you don't tell them if they breach a boundary. You don't get angry with them.
Yeah.
You just remove yourself from that situation or leave them. They've shown you what they are. They can't be trusted to accept your boundaries, which, let's be fair, virtue should be a boundary that everybody holds. But many have got these holographic belief systems. So just to clear that one up a little bit or clarify a little bit of that, boundaries are an internal job.
Mm,
Direction. This was an interesting one for I the other day. We lifted above sacral when we were talking when I was talking collaboratively higher.
yeah.
We had to let go of the idea that
Which, for
these
the
energy
record,
centers.
has been a weird experience. But
But okay, we'll get more on this so we can describe it better later.
Mm,
With the ideology, with what we've been doing, and certainly what I've been doing, is trying to bridge through the use of words that which is indescribable. I said to a brother of mine, yeah, Nick from Cabby, actually, it's like trying to explain how purple tastes to
mhm,
somebody who's never tasted anything
mhm,
and is colorblind.
mhm,
There's no words. So because there is no words, we have to try to describe it with words. And this is the bridge. And in the bridging of these things, where we use descriptors, words, the meanings are lost. And other perspectives can come in and they cause things to go askew. And these create holographic belief systems. They get interjected and personalized, and subjective natures get thrown in. And what's a melting pot of belief systems? It's not. It's not. It's just indescribable from the individual trying to explain what's going on to somebody who doesn't know it. So these words that we've been using and a lot of the themes and a lot of the chats that we've been developing are not going to go forwards. They are simply descriptors for that which will be released. And then more can come in later. Yeah. So we'll utilize these terms until they're no longer required. Sacral, for instance, is no longer required. It's a lower frequency energies, frequencies. That's all they are. Why call it anything else? And we don't exist in them. They don't need to be there. So they are nothing. Otherwise, we create them as something, and that's not the case. One of the interesting aspects to this rise of the sacral, rise through this August, is how the consciousness can be released to much higher frequency, much more powerful levels. Once density and energetic drains are lifted, filters are removed. And for the first time ever, I lost a word during my prayers, my thanks, my words of the evening. And you've sat down with I for one of these, or you've come through a little bit of it with peace, love, harmony, and all of those things. But part of it was truth, release, direction, and guidance. I give thanks every day, religiously, disciplined,
ceremonially,
to thank for truth and release, direction, and guidance. And at the end of these parts, I simply say, and I wish this for all. Now, that had to be rethunk because divinely I couldn't remember the word direction. Yeah. You know my memory, brother. Yeah. I don't drop those things.
No, you don't. So not often.
Truth, release, guidance, and I couldn't remember direction. And it transpires that this is because in wishing that for all, there's an element of my believing that it all don't have it.
Have it. Yeah.
And therefore, where I was at that moment, and for my own learning, my own lesson, it had to be removed, and a deeper conceptualization of why. And now that's been uplifted to the realization and the intention now that what I give thanks for on a collective basis, without wishing it for everybody, but knowing that they've already got it. Yeah. These things are
the same applies to the other three items as much as it does to direction.
It doesn't matter. The direction was just for it was what it was. That was the describer that was to look at.
Yeah, that was the signifier for you. But that's what I'm saying. But it's relevant to all four of them. It says, look, if you wish this for all, then you're assuming that they don't have truth, that they don't have gratitude, that they don't have direction. You're making that assumption that they don't have
in
it.
A way. Well, I wasn't.
So if you're going to make an assumption, better to make an assumption that everybody already has gratitude for it all.
If you're talking about peace, listen, thank you. Peace, love, harmony, abundance, sovereignty, health, happiness, wisdom, virtue, honor, and integrity, truth, release, direction, and guidance. And I wish this for all. Now, there's no thinking people haven't got it, but underneath it's a compassionate thing. It's full of love and expression. Of
course it is.
But underneath it, in its minutiae and its function, there is a concept.
It's undergirded by the notion that it's, you're leaving room for the potential and the possibility that there are people without.
Yes. And so in these layers and in these levels now, that's something I will never say again. Now I understand that was in there. I don't need to. I can umbrella it by just the intention. Whereas before, if you think about it, I wasn't in charge. I was saying, I wish this for all, as if somebody else would give it to everybody else. And in the intention now, it's no, I am the creator. It's my words. I'm the one speaking this out. So it is for all. In the intention of it, they've already got it, and I'm thankful for that. So it's that.
Yeah. And it also speaks to the understanding that if you have it, all being equal, everybody else must have it as well.
Therefore. Of course. But these things are throwaways difficult. These things are compassionate, and then you got to add this wisdom, this wiser version to it, and be happy to say, you know what? Yeah, I was doing that on a lower level. It wasn't my overall intention, but I do see, yes,
it can
and
be.
now I won't do it again.
There is room for refinement.
Uplift, upscale. Why would I think this if that? Okay, yeah, got it. Boom. Happy days. We can work with that less, but it's the time for that now. Now, prior to this, my, let's say, wishing this for all would have added that. And maybe there was a, well, no, not maybe, there was a divine reason why that energy was being placed into that addition then.
Yeah.
But now, no longer. Okay.
Mm.
And so, and this is that courage to accept not something wrong, but something that can be more right, more divine, more virtuous, more inclusive, more encompassing, and without any friction. This is a strange thing that happened. I wonder why. Hello, brother. What do you think? It could be because of this. Bang and whoop. Happy days. Let's move and shift. And this is the way that this game is played, right? You get the new information, you adopt it, you embody it, rationalize it, embody it, and then it becomes you. And off you go. Next bit, next bit, next bit, next bit. And I find it very, very addictive initially. And yeah, that wears off a little bit, but it doesn't stop. The increase doesn't stop.
No, it
But
doesn't.
anyway, bro, what were you going to say about the lower timer? Those two things I just wish to get this in because they were quite relevant.
Well, it fits in quite neatly, actually, and nicely because so we can use myself as an example as somebody who I mentioned earlier, this whole releasing of the sacral, and yeah, the very clear dividing between like water and oil between lower frequencies and upper frequencies. There's no focal point for anyone. There's no need to name it. Go give it focal points. It's just the miasma of lower energies, from which we should not dive into. And that has left me with a very it's like, as you say, how do you describe the taste of the color purple? Yeah, it's extremely difficult to frame into words. I mean, there are words I could use like peaceful. It's ambient, I suppose, is a word. It's like
Neutral.
very neutral. It's almost like a sensation of being underwater, but without the pressure. It's
Harmonic.
very,
Harmony.
yeah, Vex utterly unreactive to anything. Everything that happens is just a thing. And
The unmovable mover.
at first it was very like it was very it was difficult to get a sort of to coordinate to. And but as time's gone by, it's just become a state of being now. And but now I am aware of the power of my creation, reification. I said it on an earlier video, reification, this concept that the way in which we talk to something about something, if we are not, lest we are not meticulous and careful, can give it energy that is not warranted. And so I've been aware of that, but also I've been watching and observing the collapse of the old timelines, whatever you want to call it. And it's now, you know, and there's questions that arise when I do it, like, am I reifying it? Am I mean, I can't feel like I am because there is such a sensation of detachment and non-reactiveness to everything that I see that I can't really see how I am reifying it just simply in the observation of it, especially when the thoughts that come to me when I actually do observe it are taking what I'm seeing and flipping it into a higher perspective almost immediately. It's like, oh, right, okay, well, that's going on, but and then that could be reflective of that. And then I see it in as a smaller thing in part of the larger process. So when I speak to the old timeline, I feel now that I am just speaking to it. The one question that has risen in my mind recently about this, though, is I'm starting to think the answer to the question is both, but I'll ask the question anyway. The almost choreographed, orchestrated nature with which things are occurring, speeding up, but also occurring, and the way things are starting to emerge in the world around the old time as I see it. I cannot discern, because there is orchestration going on and there is choreographing going on. Some, you can call it the movie, the narrative, the whatever, the thing that is being presented to the world as a whole. And then there are the organic occurrences within that sort of bleed into what the one, each of those two different things bleed into each other. And there is an orchestration and a choreograph that is also clearly natural, and one would say divine. And it's getting very, very, I'm finding it very, very difficult to discern where one meets the other, and and I know that you could probably say, well, you could probably take a step to an even a higher level, where you would see all of those as the one thing which it actually is. But as an observer, this is the impression I'm getting, that there is this organic, natural, divine orchestration and choreography crashing up against this attempt at a contrived orchestration and choreography. And the contrast between the two seems to be getting starker and starker and starker. With I want to say with each passing day, but sometimes it seems with each passing hour. So yeah, if you want to comment on that.
There's no reason to look at them as if they're different. You've got a dark construct that doesn't know what it's doing, playing a role for the light, under the auspices of whatever human experience. The um, the current structures, let's say globally, relatively, or flat earthly, whichever one you wish, that doesn't matter, they're all the same. Doesn't matter where you go. It's just funky watching one. So pick one and just stick with that, and then recognize it on your internal levels. See, the same thing with the lower frequencies, all of those lower frequency spectrums that are within, they are only gauges. You don't need to dive into them, but they're just a gauge of a frequency that it's just like turning a radio to a no, no, no. And so it doesn't need personalizing or subjectivizing, or being a part of. It just, that's that. And there's no reification of it then. It's just, yep. And what's it doing? It's doing this to cause that. Okay. So the cause and effects, the extrapolation of the cause and effects. So each one of these is a synchronous event. They are all events that are happening on a timeline, and each one of them has its own causal and effectual outcome. Now, that only has a causal and effectual outcome to those who are harmonizing on that frequency. Those that aren't affected by it. So these are happening on multiplicative consciousness levels, where each on those frequencies, each that has those frequencies within them that are still, let's say, disharmonic, still manipulable, still unconscious, will feel them. Let's call it that, feel them. And it's what they do with that feeling. Now, some will say it's the conscious thought that creates the emotion. And I do agree, but only in creation, not in reality. I believe the emotion comes first, relatively. So the emotive creates the conscious response, and the responsive response creates the emotion. So it's that catch-22 when the lowest going, it justifies the emotion justifies it. This is where you're acting, or ones are acting from that emotion connecting to the mind. And a lot will say it's their hearts, but hearts don't create fear. So no, it's not. The fear comes from somewhere else. So any form of limitation is not from the heart. It's not from the higher human. It is from the lower human aspect. And any limited, negated, divisive, or separatist ideologies are the same. They are not of the heart. They are from the lower human primal reptilian mind, actually. But these things are So these frequency layers that each country is experiencing are no different relatively to an individual experiencing them through their lifetimes. So what the UK might be experiencing now may be different to, let's say, South Africa, but those experiences are relative to those in South Africa, and those experiences are relative to those in the UK, and they are necessary for these two. If you went there, it would feel different because that's not what you need to experience. It's here. So you have to experience what it is that you need. So these countries are all like individual frequencies. And if you take them all and you built them all up into, say, 500 countries or 500 regions, and then you split your own frequencies and your consciousness layers down into 500 lower frequencies, each impacting a different layer of fear, each giving a different layer of shame or a different experience of shame, then it's the job to harmonize each of these. So each country is doing its harmonizing on a collective scale, the same as it is on an individual scale. And this is happening on a larger scale. And then we could look at all of the planetary aspects in the galaxy or the universe, and that harmonizing too would be the same because this is all fractal. Mm-hmm. So where the divine and where the dark constructs meet is mute because it's all divine, and where the dark constructs are allowed to play these things out are divinely required, apparently, for the progression of humanity. But also, there's in this uplift, ascension, this return to grace, this remembering, not becoming, but remembering. What was I going to say there? The soul is being respected. So the oversoul, whatever soul you wish, the soul group, whatever, is being divinely respected, and therefore many aspects of that soul are being represented by inside incarnate humans, and there's restrictions and procrastination.
On that point, actually, the because the note, I can't remember what it was I was watching. It was something to do with Trump, and so the thought came to my head. Well, and it not just Trump. He's the one that triggered the notion at the time, but it applies to any kind of figure, talking head, or influencer, I suppose. The question arises, are they real? Are they fake? This or that? All these different sort of questions arise, and I'm like, there has to be, and there has to be a unifying factor here. There has to be something that you can simplify this to, that allows you to break away from all this complication, regardless of whatever cat's nest that this particular being happens to be entangled with. And what I came down to, and you can sort of correct me if you feel I'm wrong on this, is if they have a soul, they have a role. Simple. If they have a soul, they have a role, which means if they are existing right now in this, and they are not one of the minions, the soulless ones, the constructs of creation, not in it. If they have a soul, then they will have a role. Now, at this current time, they might be playing on the dark team, or they might be thinking they're playing. They might be playing on the dark team, thinking they're playing on the light team. Might be on the dark team or on the light team, thinking they're in the etc. etc. Could be all whatever it is, whatever tangled web they've weaved and cat's nest they are in. The thing you can cut through all that with is say, right, well, do they have a soul? If the answer is yes, then the answer, ergo, they will have a role. Whether they're aware of it, whether they move towards it.
Difficult one.
But it will be there.
Difficult one, that. Do they have a soul? Difficult one, that.
That's when you have to feel out, I think. Judge. Well, exactly. That's when you just have to feel out.
Then what you're going to say when you judge, if you judge them, say, no, they don't. What if they do? Are you willing to make that mistake based on your own judgment?
No,
these things are difficult. Yeah. These things are difficult to go into that. If they have a soul, they have a role. Yes, fine, whatever. Let's make it even simpler than that. These leaders that are out there, if they had leadership and if they were truly benevolent, they would look at what's best for humanity and not best for themselves as a whole and not a country. They're not a capitalistic leader, are they? They're not, or are they in charge of profit and loss? These things are very, very simple. So these guys and these ones that are offering freedoms and stuff, what are they changing? Nothing that's causing the problems. They're just offering a different way of dealing with the problems. We're going to do this. They won't.
But
No, they won't. If these leaders,
just to play
go
the
on.
devil's advocate on that, you could argue, one might make the argument or posit the argument that in their role currently, no, they're not doing all of those things you've listed, but they are bridging towards that from where we have been in some instances.
Now, I would disagree with you on that one, my friend. At this stage, these to be there, to be doing what they're doing, to be garnered that support and that media coverage, to be in these areas of that dark system, they aren't trying to do anything except maintain their positions and their dark systems. Now, does that mean they are a soul? It doesn't matter whether they've got a soul or not. What I'm saying is they're not interested in the overview at this point. Otherwise, they would be giving it to the people. And this isn't the time for that anyway, relatively. If these leaders were doing that, they wouldn't be in those positions. So the ones that are in those positions are not leaders. The ones that aren't in those positions that are giving the higher truths are the future leaders. But so on the lower timelines, these ones that are political and in these echelons of party politics and capitalistic system, good done well as, these are false. These are not false in the idea that they are dark shepherds. They are leading ones to their what would I say that would be? They're leading ones to their release. They're leading ones
yeah,
very rapidly into a war, and most of them will hit that head on. So these are dark shepherds that are leading ones to the light. Yes, and it's been happening for a long time. UK being a prime example of that currently, rather than what Trump and Kamala are doing over there. That was important 2016. Not no longer anymore. There was that area. That's just I've got nothing against all the souls in the West. But Jesus, the movements from that. So they were important then, but what really seems important now is what's going on in the United Kingdom and Europe. That's showing once when they're flying millions of South Americans into North America and relocating them all over the country, it's massive. When they're doing the same thing in the UK, it's not. When they're doing the same thing inside Europe and Ireland, well, United Kingdom, whatever. But and through all of the destabilization of this culture, right? It's the culture that they're trying to break down. They want to break humanity. Now, the higher cultures, the ones that work with more virtue, and this is fascinating looking at a few of the videos that are coming out lately about genetics and the prevalence to violence in certain ethnic groups, especially sharp-edged knives and these sort of things, is not generally a European trait.
No.
Hasn't been for a long time. Even the slave trades in the 1700s, was all picking up Europeans and taking them elsewhere. These things are not historically taught to people, yet they are prevalent. So in bringing different groups together that don't culturally accept each other through this idea of Tavistock's multiculturalism, another ism, the destabilization of those cultures which are carrying a higher human virtue is how they've tried to decrease the light and are trying to. Now, subsequent to the genocide attempt in 2020, which many don't even know yet, many people on this planet were not supposed to be here now. Many souls were supposed to have been removed in the dark plan, but they weren't in charge of what happened. And all of a sudden, they didn't depopulate the world of the cultures that they didn't require. They remained. Now we're 4 years on, and they haven't got a clue what to do to wipe humanity. They don't know how to destroy humanity. They don't know how to shut the light down because their dark controllers are gone. In fact, the light is getting brighter. So all they can do is flail and introduce more and more and more ridiculousness and nonsense to the equation that was already full of it. So what we're seeing now is this absolute stark difference to now we don't like you at all. Now we don't like any of you at all. Now all of you whites are racist and oh no, 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 no. And we are now Muslim and we're doing this and this and this and we're going to do and bring all this in. And we don't care what you say. And we're going to make it obvious that we don't care. And we're going to enforce it upon you. And we're going to push and push and push. And if you don't collapse now, you will when we introduce this next load of stuff. And this is this pressure, compression that's being placed upon humanity as a whole. Now, it feels very different in Southeast Asia, relatively. But these are cultures that are holding these values. So this isn't going to be oppressed like the other cultures were. Don't get me wrong, doesn't mean to say they're not all lovely and in their hearts. It's just culturally they are different to what the West has, and then Europe has been for a long time. So this is not taking away from anybody. It's just simply stating that culturally there is differences, and the cultures that are in the Southeast Asia are less impactful upon the dark narratives. They've been more easily oppressed and suppressed than the other cultures have. And it's the ones that haven't been able to be held back and down that they want to remove. And that was hence the lots of this going on and lots of more psyops. But as we look at it now, what we're seeing is they've got no plan. There is no everything that's been attempted has failed miserably. And in fact, everything they've tried to do, the opposite has happened. So in censorship, they've created more outlets. In pushing the legacy media, they've created more alternative media. In trying to use digital platforms like Facebook and all of these from DARPA to garner information on everybody, to be able to make the AIs whatever run and control humanity, they've released humanity. And all of these things didn't work. And it wouldn't have worked because they know they're not going to work, but they can't not try them because they were supposed to work.
Well, yeah,
So
I'd say we've definitely moved into a phase where it's clear to see that for every step forward they take, the light pushes them 3 steps back, and they can't. And they're they are tantruming a lot,
hugely. Yeah. And we know from the planetary demographics, at least to the figures that are given somewhere near, that relatively on the planet, there's 77% of humanity believing God, whatever God that may be.
Higher power.
And there's 25% of humanity, or 23%, that don't. We also know from the figures we've been given divinely that approximately 3/4 of the planet is human, but 1/4 isn't. And all of these line up in weird and wonderful ways. And I'm not casting aspersions on anybody that may have differences of opinions. And I'm not saying you have or haven't, or anybody has or hasn't got a soul and they are a dark clone. But yet, even that old book that many like, I think it was that warned, or something that warned of men made by men. And at the end days, men made by men will be gone.
I can't remember it.
It could have been a men made by men. I'm not sure where it came from, but it definitely said men made by men. And these are the clones, the constructs, the minions that are scripted AI. They're not carrying the compassion. They mimic higher virtue and honor. They haven't got the ability for it. They're not light. Nothing against that which is of creation, but it's not divine, and it doesn't exist here.
There's like, so at the moment there we've been given significant reason to believe that the 15th of November is a very key date, potential event date, inception of GPMS, or vast rising consciousness, whatever. And it does, as you were saying, the way things sink into in time, everything just slots into. I mean, because to me that is and actually a very realistic and feasible time for a culmination point of all of the events that are currently occurring. You've got the American elections on the 5th of November, I believe. So it's 10 days out. So it would be 10 days out from the American elections. By that time, there's several other elections going on as well. I think there's an election in Ireland going on as well. But by that time as well, the things that are occurring at the moment are exponentially unfolding. There's no let up of pressure. There's no pause in anything. There's only escalation and there's only rapid increase on a daily basis. So given that from where we are now to the 15th of November, it makes sense to me that that would be a key fulcrum point for everything that is currently occurring.
believe that the pivot point was August. Currently, if we go to November and this changes, the pivot point would have been August. What you've just described there is perfect, but what you're talking to there is a lower timeline, as if that's the one that's going to impact the whole, and it's not.
No, but the lower timeline has to be is going to be wrapped up. So it makes sense to me it could wrap itself up quite neatly in that.
Doesn't. That's the difference. The lower timeline can be wrapped up now. It's not the lower timeline that's of importance here. It's the higher one. Right. The quantity of humanity is not the key here. It's the quality of the divine aspects of humanity that is the key here. And with humanity, let's say the human souls that need to continue to integrate this through these frequencies will continue in that lower fifth frequency. But that doesn't mean to say that they've released sacral and all the rest of these things at this stage. They're working through that process, but the divine echelons will have. And there's at this stage, relatively to what could be, then this is the release point of that. And now we're in the integration point of that. So this would be where self-realization has come in to a large degree, but not fully recognized yet on a divine level. So think about your virtue. Think about that day we spoke, and I spoke to you. We spoke about virtue, and we talked about it on a higher divine level, and it impacted you, brother. Now that may have impacted you for 3 to 5 days, maybe I don't know. It certainly knocked you back a little bit, and it wasn't recognized what it meant initially, except the impact was, and then it had to be integrated. What does this mean? How does this work? How do I work with this? How do I action this? And that took a process. That took a period. Now, if we take that same theme function and we put it at the end of August and we put it into 5 million divine brothers and sisters and lift them into a place of less separation and more unity, higher expanded viewpoints and virtue, lifting quite significantly from that previous version, and each then taking a little bit of time to integrate that, reconcile that, garner that aspect, and action it. In the old ways of looking at it, even though I'm not going to use, but this is just what has been. At each one of these given times, there's a 10-week period, and then a week of further integration, and a new script for another 10-week period. So this was 3 monthly, and August the 31st to November, 3 months, 10 weeks, and yeah, what's going on in the lower timeline is gravy, and that's shifting all of those human energetics to collapse this existing structure. But it's the higher timeline and the divine ones that come into unity, and where two or more are, whatever the words are, then I will be there.
Present in my name, so there shall I be.
Yeah, and if we take in my name and we say in benevolence, in integrity, in virtue, in honor, in a trust, in agreement,
consciousness.
Yes, and take all of these. So take away the religious aspect and just put agreements in place for higher virtue and divine virtue, God's law, God's will, and agree upon the bases of that, the common ground. We only need 6,000 to change 6 billion, to affect 6 billion, one affecting a million. So where one high frequency affects a million very low.
Funny enough, brother, I've been a lot of information's been coming to me recently about it's starting to come out that there may have been drastic porkies told about the actual population levels of the planet. And
Possibly.
because a load of people have basically like they said, all right, well, if there is this many people on the planet, that should be fairly easy enough in modern data science to prove. So basically, they just went and they just actually got the figures from individual cities and towns and just added them up. And everywhere around the world where they added them up, they fell well short of what
I've got to stop you.
The
I've got to
United
stop
Nations
you.
is trying to say is populated.
It doesn't matter. I've got to stop you. That's not a multidimensional count.
Okay.
I can't, bruv, go into these things like that and reify it. I know
Right.
I've
Okay.
got my doubts, but it's not a multidimensional count. We can't get a count on how many humans are on the planet at any given time because it changes, because it's multidimensional. Or how many incarnated souls are here because it's multidimensional. So we can't get a number. The number we are working with currently was 8 billion. I know it doesn't seem that many, but and then it was given to us that 500,000 had disappeared, 7.5 billion was left. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether we need 6,000 or whether we need 600. Currently, we can't get six to sit together and agree. And this is the strangeness of all of this because others have got their own divisive separations. You know this
I do believe
with
that's changing.
GPMS. All right,
Yeah, I do believe that's
it's
changing now.
changing.
That it is changing
I
drastically.
get absolutely agree with you. Yes, and it must. And nevertheless, it's what we've been on the extrapolation, the garnering of the troops, the call to
Falling of
arms, the
the
shoulder to
banners. Yeah,
shoulder,
yeah.
brother to brother, is inevitable. Right
Mhm.
now, we can say it's changing,
It's
but
occurring.
the inevitability, yes, it is. And speaking to Nick and John and a load of the other guys, they're coming. We've been in tears many times with others, brother, who are brothers, yet divinely they had to reject themselves because. But we've met them and been in tears with the common ground. We know on a soul level that, and
Mm.
yet it didn't happen. Then it will, and so I anticipate. That's all. That key pivotal point was August, and that in the next couple of months we'll see a lot more unity of the higher quality,
Mm.
and it doesn't knock anybody else who's not that because you are that. It's just not
Mm.
the role here. So that quality coming in, the divine echelons, the delegations, the designations, moving into their higher authority, which their higher hearts, their higher consciousness recognizes then the divinity and the hierarchy within that divinity of others who are carrying the energies of the divine on this plane and not negating and rejecting them anymore, but open to them because there's no fear left. Prior shame was causing this separation. If the sacral and the whole energetic idea of the sacral is released, there is no shame. But that takes a little bit of time within each to work it out. And that's possibly where we currently are. So November the 15th was given by Father as the closest possible date for this to be culminated through GPMS inception. Um, let's see. And I don't wish to talk about anything about November the 25th or anything later, but let's see as we go through this without projecting a completion. But we are in another layer of crescendo. And it does feel, when Rick and I were speaking, it does feel like a tidal wave again, where currently the direction that's being lost isn't direction that's being lost. It's a feeling of the water being sucked out
Yeah, yeah.
whilst
Before
the
the big
surge
one.
comes back. Yeah. So I'm blessed. There's a few, I don't know how many others, possibly yourself too, brother, to a certain degree, to be riding this one as
Mm.
opposed to be roping around
Rolling
in
in
it.
it. Yeah.
But there's
Mm.
many that are
Still
currently
rolling.
being
Oh yeah.
destabilized on those lower frequencies, which they had to hold to get them to where they are
Yeah.
relatively. And now's the time for them to go. And
Yeah.
that may mean that some may think, they may lose their superficiality. They may find that they weren't who they thought they were. But that's no bad thing. It just shows you that you were trusting the wrong area. and that allows each to move into higher trust. It matters not whether you were right or wrong. It matters what you do next.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the keys. These things about forgiveness and release doesn't matter, right or wrong. That's a ridiculous notion. It's what we do next that counts. And that's where each stands in their honor or doesn't. Dishonorable or honorable.
Mm-hmm.
Graceful or disgraceful. Doesn't matter. Are you going to learn from it? And that's where, yeah.
Awareness, acknowledgement, acceptance, forgiveness, release.
Gratitude.
And then gratitude, yes. Six.
Gratitude. Without the gratitude, you're stuck in an area of limbo of acceptance.
Yeah,
I've got to accept everything.
Well, yeah,
and that can get a little bit.
That's why I put in acceptance, forgiveness, and release, because you got to forgive yourself for being put yourself in that position in the first place, and then release it as something that no longer matters, and then be grateful for the experience.
Yes, the gratitude, but it's not just the experience; it's the opportunity. Of course, if there's shame in there, then it feels that way. But if there's no shame and there's just, I was speaking to a couple of guys yesterday, and I sent them some pictures. They wanted to know about hair. They're talking about hair from a younger age, and I haven't got any pictures of eye, but there's a few around, and I was sending them in. And you know what? I was talking to myself in a third party. One of them said, "Oh, when I was 21, he's stud or something." I said, "You know what? He didn't know. He didn't have a clue how he looked on the outside. He was just in turmoil on the inside. Love him. He didn't have a clue. He was so lost. But that was an aspect of that was an aspect that I have within that I love to bits for what he did. But I do recognise that what was on the, because I know what was within, that the confidence that looks like on the outside wasn't within, and now it is. So these things, I can look at the older aspects of Lee, and they're all Lees, but Lee is a we, and it's also a lot higher. There's loads of Lees and Lees down here, and they're all one of everything. So I think Lee, all the Lees, we, all in one, and everything.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to recognize, and of course, this is trying to describe the color purple, the taste of purple.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
It's just a lot of fun. We can have a lot of fun with it as long as it's objective. It's not personal. And this is where we're going very, very shortly. The multidimensionality is non-personal. It's objective. It's just releasing those personalized ideologies.
Well, I'll tell you what. Then we'll wind it down there. But we'll finish it by with this question to you. What do you feel in the coming weeks, shall we say? I'm not going to say months, the coming weeks, that people should look out for, either in themselves, in the reality that's forming around them, to what should they be paying attention for within themselves and within reality as sort of signifiers that it's going well. It's going in the direct. They are on track.
Well, I'm not going to say what they should. I mean, the thing about that is confirmations are individual and personal to the individual.
Of course, yeah.
Many don't necessarily see the confirmations because they're oblivious or don't look for them and don't believe. So what I would suggest to each to do is to look at what it is that they feel about themselves and whether or not they are feeling more solid, more serene, more at peace, or are they feeling more fearful, fear-based, lack, concerned, unsure, uncertain, doubtful, or are they more integral? Do they feel more, I don't even know what the words are, core, not spread, concentrated rather than dilute? Are they more about this rather than that? And the release, if they're looking at anything outside that is giving a basic kind of anxiety, anything within, stop looking at it. The choice of how you feel on an individual level is yours and yours alone. And it's for each of every single one to understand that virtue, honor, integrity, trust, and truth, and all of these things are valuable beyond measure. and any of those lesser forms are not important. Don't give them importance. And what you should be finding over these next upcoming weeks is that you're not. You're not giving that importance. You're not giving that which is less important. You're not paying attention to it. You're much more solid. You're much more
You have a greater,
calm.
you have a greater sense of self-worth.
Calm. You know more than you doubt. And you know nothing, but you don't doubt anything.
Yeah,
And these things are,
that's a good way.
I know they sound philosophically open, but it's a sense of generalized feeling that you can't really explain, and the feeling's not true either. So it's all like it all shifts. And again, we're trying to bridge that which isn't into that which isn't by giving it words that don't mean much except to the individual's perspectives. So in this, it's the release, the stripping of anchors, the stripping of weight, the stripping of density, the release of individuals that are causing angst, not because you're angry with them, but because it's the right thing to do for you. The release of situations, jobs, material things, the release of ideologies and belief systems, and expansion into that which is unknown. But that which is unknown doesn't carry the fear it used to, because that which is known is untenable. It can't be maintained, and nor will it in any form that is lacking in integrity. So once we'll garner these things, and they will start to feel them. And I know that if anybody's watching this to this point, A, thank you. And B, that you would have already felt these things too. So this is a confirmation to anybody watching this that you're all on the right path anyway. And there's nothing you can do that's wrong. Don't judge anything. Just look at everything as a learning curve and move on, and account for your own actions and move by action to the next action. You haven't got to say anything to anybody. You just not got to do it again. And that's accounting to yourself, self-responsibility. And that's what people will garner. And that's what releases and removes this lack system that is currently running. When we are running without it internally, it does not represent itself on the outside. It only represents itself from outside when we are representing it from within. So as each embodies that value, intrinsic, authority, authentic, divine value, so does the external. And we need to do this as a core group, as is the team, which are here currently to assure, guarantee, guide, and assist this to its fruition, which looks very much like it could be November the 15th, as you said, brother, with a little wink.
We'll see.
So I love you all. Thank you so much, Mike, brother Mike, for having a chat with I for a couple of hours. And I love you, brother, too. And anybody that watches this, we got it. Keep going.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. As Lee said, if you've watched to this point, it's been a great conversation as usual, and a great first guest appearance on Guardian Talks. So everybody, thank you for watching, and watch this space.